Hi everyone, Jason here from spiritualbabies.net, joined again this week by Rabbi Joshua Neely, and we are back into the book of Hosea, or Hoshea, and we're on chapter 12 and verse 1. You can find our previous programs on this book in the playlist, which will pop up in the corner of your screen now, or there's a link underneath this video. We're just going to jump right in. Ephraim has surrounded me with lies, and the house of Israel with deceit, but Judah still rules with God, and with the Holy One, he is faithful. Now, I did read through this earlier, and it kind of is a little bit confusing in that it seems to be that Ephraim and Israel are being kind of dissed a little bit here. They're being called out. But how can Judah still rule with God if Judah is also deceitful?
We are still a little baffled by the question of calling Judah righteous or somehow with God when Judah has also a pretty shaky track record. So that's where we have to remember from our history that as bad as Israel was, or as bad as Judah was, Israel was much, much worse during the split kingdom period. So Judah was always at least a little better. And in particular, a lot of people have pointed to the unique verb here of rad that's being translated as ruled, with the idea being that the kings of Judah did generally still keep the services of God and the ways of God, even if they didn't always lead the people away from their own idolatrous practices as well. So there was always a bit of a mixed message in the south compared to the north, but the north was completely surrounded with everything bad.
And it ends up with and with the Holy One, he is faithful. He there being then Judah.
Yes.
Just to dot all the I's.
Yeah, get the pronouns in line.
Ephraim joins the wind and chases the east wind. All day he increases deceit and plunder, and they make a treaty with Assyria, and oil is brought to Egypt. Now, we've spoken before, because it's come up before in this, about Ephraim looking towards Assyria and looking towards Egypt. What in particular are we looking for when it mentions the east winds? Is there, because I mean, why not just leave it with the wind? Is there a special reason that the east wind is important?
So some commentators point out that this idea of pursuing or tending, roe actually means to be a shepherd of the wind, is the idea that this was part of the natural idolatry of worshiping the wind, and the east wind. This is sort of like adding insult to injury. The east wind was considered to be like useless. It was terrible. It was when the east wind blew, it was hot and dry and destructive. And because you're blowing in off the desert of Jordan rather than blowing in from the coolness of the Mediterranean. So to say that they were running after to pursue the east wind is basically to say they're so dumb in their idolatry, they're running after something that's even self-destructive to them. But that's how enmeshed they are in their iniquity.
And again, when we come down to the two countries that I mentioned, Egypt is explicitly pointed out with oil. So the oil that's being taken to Egypt, is this to gain favor?
It's tribute, exactly.
Good, that was nice, easy answer. Now the Lord has a contention with Judah, and to visit upon Jacob according to his ways, according to his deeds, he shall recompense him.
To visit upon Jacob basically means to pay back what is commensurate with his actions.
Oh, right. So visit literally has something to do with kind of justice and...
Yes, exactly.
Right, okay.
So yeah, this is basically saying Jacob's going to get what Jacob deserves.
In the womb, again, this is talking explicitly, it's kind of a picture of Jacob, right? How Jacob started as a people rather and the story of Jacob as a human is being projected over the people. In the womb, he seized his brother's heel, and with his strength, he strove with an angel. If you're watching this and you don't know about the kind of birth story of Jacob, you really should be reading that before you read this, but that's okay. I have a question about the angel part.
Yes.
Does it say angel or does it say Malak? Is it actually an angel or is it a messenger?
It does not say the word for angel or messenger, which are one and the same. It instead says the word Elohim, which is used as a stand-in for divine being here. And that's a fairly common usage throughout the text.
Well, that's blown my mind.
And so when we talk about struggling, which is exactly what's being used here, right, Sarah, is that is exactly the language that's used in the famous fight scene for Jacob when he gets his leg wrenched and when he gets the special name. So that's, that root is why we're called Yisrael, to struggle with El, to struggle with that which is divine. And most of the commentators point out that this is an example in verse 4 of what God has done on behalf of Jacob. And yet, ... he ends up doing so much that's terrible. And remember, in this particular case, we're probably in this metaphor leaning on Jacob and Jacob's other name, Israel, as a stand-in for just the northern kingdom, not necessarily for Judah as well.
He strove with an angel and prevailed. So he strove with Elohim and prevailed, am I right?
Well, he strove with the other, that which... there we actually have angel.
Okay.
Yeah. So there it's, coming back into line with the Malach. And so that's giving us also the reason why we know that in previous verse 4, that the Elohim there was not talking about the big Elohim, meaning God, but instead talking about that which was divine, meaning an angel.
He wept and besieged him. In Bethel he shall find him, and there he shall speak with us. Now, that in Bethel, that's where Jacob anointed the stone, and he slept, and I believe he saw the ladder with the angels going up and down on it.
Yes, exactly. Well, and that was, the whole idea of the round trip for Jacob's life. The site of Bethel was very important for that. And the idea here is that this has been now misused by the northern kingdom, which are now using the idea of Beit El as being a place where they can also do idolatrous practices. Because, see, the angel said that's a gateway. So therefore, we can do our idolatrous stuff here, and that's perfectly fine and all of that. And of course, God is saying that's not the point.
When I read this, there are some notes that say that the he wept in the first line references the angel and not Jacob. Is that
oh yes, exactly. No,
right?
it is that the angel cried out and said, "You must release me," and then he said, I won't release you until you tell me your name." Blah 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 blah. The whole story. So yes, this is a very nice paraphrase of the wrestling scene between Jacob and the angel in Genesis.
And Jacob says, "I won't release you unless you give me a blessing."
Exactly.
And then in Bethel, just because if there are people following along at home, they're going to be asking these questions. He shall find him. It's a capitalized him. I'm assuming the him is the creator. The he, is this the people of Jacob? Because this is something that's going to happen. And there he shall speak with us. So are we still in the chapter of where Jacob's wrestling? Or
yes, is that's the idea, that Jacob will still have that that connection with God, and that's what the idea being that Jacob had this special ability. He had this special connection. He was able to try and wrestle his brother in the womb. Rather surprising and unnatural, an amazing gift from God of trying to take his place. He was able to wrestle with an angel. Again, not something that most people do. And he was able to meet God through Beit El. And all of that was meant to show God's beneficence. But the commentators point out that the northern tribes seem to be seeing, especially the Bethel part, as meaning, hey, we can meet God wherever we want. Especially here at Bethel, because Jacob did, who's our primogenitor. Therefore, we don't need Jerusalem. We don't need the actual temple service. We don't need the Torah and all the other commandments.
Brilliant. Okay. And verse 6. And the Lord is the God of hosts. The Lord is his name. And you shall return by your God, keep loving kindness and justice, and hope to your God always. Now, who's this addressed to?
So this is the antithesis of what the northern Israelites are doing, right? They are thinking they can do whatever they want. They can call God whatever they want. They can worship these idols that they've created for themselves, and they can be as unjust as they want. And this is saying, you've got the story of Jacob wrong, right? That's not the conclusion of the story of Jacob. The conclusion of the story of Jacob is recognize God in everything good that happened for Jacob, and recognize that goodness is what God wants, right? That he wants chesed and mishpat. He wants, this kindness and justice, which is, as we've seen in other parts of Hosea, not what's going on in the north. And they want people to trust in God, not to, or hope for God. It's kavez. The word literally means hope, but it can mean like look to with hope. That should be the focus, and instead of looking to these idols.
A trafficker who has deceitful scales in his hand, he loves to oppress. See, some of this is quite difficult to read because it seems like it's jumping around.
It is, but this is again flipping back, and it's like, so, and you could imagine that this is being a subtle play off the story of Jacob, right? Jacob, all the good stuff that happened for him was from God, but Jacob also did have an element of deceit to him. Right, and remember that was part of the play on words when Esau sort of renamed him, not for heel but as deceiver, right? That was a bit of a play on his name, and so the idea that the northern tribes have picked the wrong lessons to learn from Jacob's life is kind of a powerful theme going on here. Rather than recognizing all the good that came to Jacob when he was with God, they have focused on the shrewdness of Jacob and decided that they can do the same thing.
And Ephraim said, surely I have become rich. I have found power for myself. All my toils shall not suffice for my iniquity, which is sin. So at this point, have Ephraim's woken up and smelt the coffee?
No. They're still perfectly happy in their arrogance.
Even though they know that they're
so that's the thing. So the last translation you just read, I'm not 100% fond of.
Okay.
So let's do the first half, right? I've become rich, I've gotten power, right? This is the call of the arrogant, which is basically, look, I've cheated, I've lied, I've stolen, and I've prospered. So therefore, what I'm doing must be right, right? This is the claim of everyone who believes that, only bad things happen to bad people. Then they believe the obverse, which is, if nothing bad has happened to me, I must be good. And therefore anything I've done must have been fine, or else God would have punished me. And that power of self-delusion among the arrogant is one of the main things that both the Torah and the prophets are constantly railing against. And here we get it in just a very pithy phrase. And so the second half of the verse, actually I like the translation that I've got here a little better, which is, all my gains do not amount to an offense, which is real guilt. Right? Basically, you're not going to find... fine, go ahead and examine me. Must not have sinned at all, right? You will not find in me a sin, right? There's nothing that's actually a sin that I've done. It's kind of like trying to say, well, technically everything I've done in my business was within the law, and yet everybody can see that it's horribly immoral. But of course, we know that they've done lots of things outside the law too, and against the law. But that seems to be what Ephraim is claiming.
That translation does make a lot more sense.
Right? Because this is Ephraim's own words, which is, nothing I've done amounts to a real sin, right? And again, that's the self-delusion of the arrogant, which is, first they think they did it all by themselves. Second, they think that they must not have done anything wrong, because otherwise why have they succeeded? And third, they think, well, maybe if I'd done something wrong, maybe it was a little wrong, but it wasn't really wrong. It's not like I did anything majorly bad. And that's this the wonderful psychology of self-delusion of wrongdoing.
And I am the Lord your God from the land of Egypt. I will yet make you dwell in tents, as in the days of early in brackets times. The Lord your God from the land of Egypt, a reminder there of how he displayed himself and showed that he was the God of these people back in the day when they were in bondage.
Certainly partly, and also partly the you owe everything you have to me. right? So this is again to try and be the antidote to the arrogance of the last verse, which is, how do you think you got this land? How do you think you got to be successful and powerful? Right? I took you out of nothing, slavery, bondage, everything, and gave you all of this. And now you're repaying me by saying, I did it without noticing God. And not just not noticing me, but violating everything I stand for by not having any chesed or mishpat, any kindness or justice. I mean, the affront is amazing. Now, the second half of this verse is a little bit harder to nail down, and that's why the commentators get to be divided. So some of them are basically saying you're going back to the tense in a negative sense, basically like you'll be exiled again. Some of them read it, the Ohalim, the tense, as being the metaphor for study, meaning that you have to go back to school, right? Eventually you will realize your problems and you'll go back to learn what it is to be righteous again, the same way you had to learn what it meant to be righteous when you first left Egypt, back in the honeymoon period. So the second half of here is either a prophecy for good or a prophecy of punishment.
And I spoke to the prophets, and I increased their visions, and to the prophets I assumed likenesses. Now, which prophets? I mean, is this basically a summation of everything that's happened prior to this message?
Exactly right. Basically, God is saying, I didn't leave you alone. Right? It's not like I brought you out of Egypt and then said, okay, you're on your own. Right? I brought you out of Egypt. I gave you the Torah. I feel like I'm doing Dayenu again from the Seder. Right? I brought you out of Egypt. I gave you the Torah. I gave you the land. I even gave you prophets that kept coming and giving you the visions that you needed to know what was the right way to be on. And I gave them these appearances, these, I'm trying to think of the right, that's not really the right best English word.
Is that like analogies?
Metaphors,
euphemisms,
exactly. Right. I appeared in ways that they could understand in order that I would be understandable to the nation so it could follow me. It's like a teacher who says, I didn't just lecture the text. I really tried to break this into examples and give you comparisons and other things that you could hold on to understand it. I tried to teach you to the best of my ability, ungrateful kids. and that really seems to be the attitude here in this verse.
If there is violence in Gilead, it is because they were but vanity. In Gilgal they sacrificed oxen. Also their altars were like heaps on the furrows of the field. We've covered Gilead and Gilgal, I think, popped up in this a few times already. I'm not sure if we can't just skip that. I am curious about the furrow. Why also their altars were like the heaps on the furrows of the field. Does it just mean like plentiful? They were all over the place?
Quite probably.
Okay.
Right, that this is a it's like you can't go what's the right phrase? You can't go a foot without stubbing your toe on one.
I see. Yeah. Okay.
Right. Because they're everywhere, and when you're plowing a field, you don't want stones. They're a nuisance, right? As you're running your plow through the field, and so you have to take and lift the stone out, and you make piles along the furrows as you go. And this is what is now. So these are the heaps of stones. It's like everywhere you go, you find another one of these, shrines and altars, and it's like you make a pile of them, and it's just piling up everywhere. And it's like, where do they keep coming from? Which is the lament of any farmer who's ever had to work behind a plow, from what I understand, which is, why does the earth keep giving birth to stones?
And Jacob fled to the field of Aram, and Israel worked for a wife, and for a wife he guarded. Now, it mentions two wives, or one wife. Right,
so yeah, we are now going back again in this intertwining message, back to Jacob the person, but again using Jacob the person as a metaphor for Israel the country. So him fleeing to Aram is now being seen as being a bit of a callback to the diplomatic endeavors of the current Israelite administration, who were also looking to the question of whether to ally with Assyria or Aram or anyone else. And Aram was actually usually a problem. I'm basically pointing out here that he ended up working awfully hard when he tried that. That didn't go so well. I mean, sure, he got a wife, but if you've read the story of Jacob, you know this wasn't an easy time for him.
I just wondered, because the wife, he worked for a wife, which would have been Rachel.
But well, he ended up working for Leah inadvertently, and then had to work further to pay off the debt of Rachel.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I just wondered if there was one wife per comment, because the guarded part didn't quite ring for a wife he guarded. Do you have the same?
Well,
words?
he guarded. Yeah, guarded. The implication there was guarded sheep. He was a shepherd.
For a wife he guarded. That makes isn't that funny? I was just reading it like for a wife he guarded, like he guarded a wife, but no.
Okay, I see what you right now. It's a transitive verb, but the object of the verb is implied rather than actually spelled out.
And for a wife he guarded. That makes much more sense. All
right.
right.
If you use the word worked, right, and for a wife he worked, that might make it clearer.
And through a prophet, the Lord brought up Israel from Egypt, and through a prophet they were guarded. That prophet, I'm sure, Moses.
Exactly right. And again, notice the parallel and why we use the term guard in the last one rather than shepherd or something else, because we're trying to now create a parallel that when Jacob was left on his own, he got taken advantage of. And he ended up, looking after the sheep. He was the guard, and that was not such a fun place to be. But when God was taking care of Jacob, he brought him up out of Egypt where he got himself stuck. And when God was taking care of him, God and the prophet, meaning Moses, guarded Jacob. And that's a much better position for Jacob to be in, right? It's much better to have God and God's prophets looking after us than it is for us to be stuck outside looking after sheep. Yet, despite that, we still get it wrong. And that's what verse 15 comes to drive home.
Ephraim provoked, yea, bitterness. Therefore his blood shall be cast upon him, and his disgrace his Lord shall requite upon him. Now I'm guessing the yea isn't there.
There is no yea in the Hebrew, I'm afraid. No. I mean, there are certain Hebrew words that do correspond to a Hebrew, yea, but there isn't one in this particular verse.
This is kind of an echo of what we had at the beginning. His blood shall be cast upon him. That it's the reward he's gained or the punishment he's gained as a result of his actions.
Exactly right, and it's the blood of the people that he has wounded, the blood that he has spilt of the innocent. It's not like his blood, meaning the blood in his own veins. It's the blood that he has shed will come back to haunt him.
Good. I think that's the end of that chapter.
That is.
Oh, we flew through that. That was fab. All right, okay. You guys at home, if you want to watch the rest, as I said, there's a link to the playlist at the top. If you hang around to the end of the video, there will be a link to all of the videos I have done with Rabbi Neely and to his channel where you can go and read about the Torah portions and the Haftorah portions and Mishnah and a load of other great videos. Thank you very much, Rabbi, for giving us your time today.
Thanks, Jason.
And we'll see you guys very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.